We are live. Cross, get off. That's what I'm talking about. Cross did it. Get out of here. So as always, episode 11 of the Lyrical Ones podcast. I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight. As we record this live, as you can see, we've made the transition since episode 7. We interviewed Lacey. And now, per Lacey's referral and in connection to an event we have coming up, our guest is Say. So, Say, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I mean, it's a blessing to have you here. I know that the connection more so is the tribute to Asian American storytelling that's going to be happening on the 14th, this Friday at 7 p.m. For those of you that don't know, you can go to the Lyrical Opposition and Lyrical Ones, social media profiles, and you'll be able to see how to get access to that. We spoke about it last week. We're going to have a little bit more of a follow-up conversation this week, and with the storytelling aspect in mind, touch on where Say comes from, kind of their process. How did they get to this point in life, right? How did they get here? And I think that it's important that we have these conversations and these stories shared with people to not only highlight and uplift, but to inspire based off of the reality. Like, we often take ourselves for granted. We take our achievements for granted. And I think we got to celebrate that. We got to really shout that out. So as I say what, because, we have Say, and that's one of my favorite songs. Go check it out.
And y'all, what's up.
If you've seen the Japanese, French anime motherfuckers, then you'll see on my Instagram that I've paid homage. And so this is a very, kind of full circle, if you will, kind of thing right now. So Say, thank you for being here with us tonight. As we fumble into the madness, deep into the hours, just roll with us. I mean, looking at your bio that I was blessed with, you have a comedic background as well as, kind of a artistic, creative, just Renaissance-like persona. So, with all that, Say, how did you get to this point here right now? Take us on the journey of when did you realize you were this Renaissance kind of phenomenon?
Thanks. Wow, that was quite the introduction. Thank you, Senio and Alex and June for having me. Yeah, I am a drummer, filmmaker, comedian, and poet, and I'm going to take it way back. I'm a lot older than I look. Grew up in the 80s in LA. I was born and raised in the San Fernando Valley, and I have a pretty interesting story. So my first sentence when I was like 2 years old was, "I'm a boy," even though like my sex assigned at birth was female. And as you can imagine, I got bullied a ton. Like, I'm in the 80s, like presenting as a guy, sex assigned at birth, female. So I was a very sensitive soul, would go into the boys' restroom because whenever I went to the girls' restroom, I got slapped and teased. So I was forced to like just make adjustments so I wouldn't get bullied. And one of those adjustments was that at a very early age, I learned how to protect myself through, number one, I became friends with like some gang members at my school. So I got involved in that scene, like Asian American gangs in Los Angeles. And then the other thing was if you're performing and people are laughing and people are enjoying what you're doing, they're less likely to beat you up and make fun of you. So I think that's how I got into like performing. I became a drummer at the age of 12, and by the age of 16, I was like the lead drummer at my high school. I was at a performing arts high school, Van Nuys High. And then I also got into comedy and it's funny because Dave Chappelle shares about that. He couldn't protect himself. He's kind of like a scrawny kid. So he realized like, I got to get really good at comedy if I don't want to get killed here. And that's pretty much what led me into like drumming, storytelling, comedy, and poetry. And but now it's a real blessing to be an artist and to have those gifts and have gotten into the arts at a young age.
That's what's up. That's powerful, because we don't really think about it, but art is a defense, right? Like, art becomes a shield to like whatever offensive, kind of how limited people are in their appreciation and understanding of differences, right? Like,
Yeah.
I often say, you have to accept the differences because that's all we have. That's literally what we have dealt with, right? Out of all the animals and things on this planet, we are the most diverse species, and we have such limited ability and our acceptance of that. And that's just the absolute truth. But for you, it was like, I need to build up the systems that are going to help me transverse through all this, right? I gotta make it to my next destination. So now I'm going to develop these skills, these talents that are going to be like, it almost creates a buffer, right? It's like, I'm on stage. Now you have to listen to me. Like, whether I'm performing as a drummer or whether I'm a comedian. I mean, even now, like pushing the narrative on diversity, equity, inclusion, and being thoughtful in that process. Those are all ways to engage and create that kind of wall that you need. Because I've said it in the beginning, I'll say it now, you need boundaries. You have to have boundaries, right? You can't win the race if you burn out. And the race isn't necessarily against anyone but yourself, but other people act as hurdles in that race. And you have to be mindful of how do you adjust your pace. And so, boundaries are necessary. And I think that, hearing that, especially where, I mean, I probably get a lot of heat and say, you didn't say this, but I'm going to say it. Lightweight Beyonce kind of stole the concept of your song when you announced how you like your identity, right? Like Beyonce was like, if I was a boy, but you weren't saying if, you were saying I am. And I think it's profound and bold to even, to have to live with that, right? Because people, they don't know how to adjust to another person's truth. Like, really think about that. Like, we often have a hard time accepting our own truth. Now accept someone else's truth, right? Where it goes against the grain, where it's not a part of what the norm is, the cultural, societal, like what is the agreements we've made. And you're like, nah, I'm cutting through all that. I'm not riding on the freeway. I'm taking the sky, right? And it's like, wait a minute, what? And now it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna make you laugh. I'm gonna entertain you. I'm gonna be the thing, your source of joy and kind of the needle in your side. So with that, I know that like you are very proactive in that field of like diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, what made you kind of make that shift from, not just being the talent, but being, the activist, right? Being proactive. Yeah, you could have easily went down and just being a comedian and made people laugh. And, you could have been provocative in that way. But to make a claim to then push the narrative on diversity, equity, and inclusion, how did you start that process?
Great question. So how I got into it was that I came out. So the other half of the story, I spent my first 20 years of my life living as male presenting. And then through pressure, unfortunately, from, relatives as well as my church, I became more female presenting and tried to be straight and just live that lie, live that facade. And when I got to 37 years old, I'm like, I can't do this. I was super depressed. I mean, it is the most draining, depressing thing to try to hide who you truly are. And I couldn't do it anymore. And when I decided to come out, I lost a lot of my friends. Initially, my family wasn't so supportive of it. And I turned to, actually, it was Black History Month, went to the Black employee resource group at the company I was at the time called Workday. And we were going around sharing in these small groups of 6 people around our identities and how can we make work a safe place for our multifaceted identities. And I broke down and I just started crying. I'm like, I just came out. I've lost a lot of friends and family. And I don't know what to do. And they immediately, they adopted me. They took me under their wing and just really made me feel like I was family and I belonged. And that totally changed my life. They showed me what it means to be an accomplice, an ally, to stand by somebody who's marginalized, because they understood what it meant to be marginalized for being born the way that they are. And so I think once I experienced that sense of belonging, I wanted to create that at companies. So that's why I've been starting to get into DEI. I want to create a sense of belonging and connection for everyone. So my story, you know, I spent 20 years male presenting, female presenting, and I help bridge the understanding between those seemingly opposing groups. And I occupy this like thin, narrow line, you know, not male nor female, you know, and then I'm also a Christian and a queer person. And I occupy that thin, narrow line that, you know, not a lot of people occupy. Same thing with being Asian American. You know, I bridge the East and the West. I sit on that thin, narrow line as an Asian American. And what that taught me is I want to create community for those people who are feeling like they're on that thin, narrow line, that don't belong anywhere, and to really create a sense of family and community and belonging for them. So that's what got me into DEI, is all about like, I've been marginalized, I've been the outcast, and I never want anyone to experience that. I want to make a home for everyone here. Because, you know, my friend Jane said this to me last night, like, we're all here to help each other find our way home. And that's what I want to do for the rest of my life, is help people find their way home, help find community, belonging, and love.
That's what's up. That's what's up. I mean, home is where the heart is. So, you know, it is a pursuit of your own self-discovery and love for yourself. So, you know, I'm all for it. I mean, the other me, the me without the mask, right now, I'm having my own battles with, you know, inclusiveness, diversity, equity, and allyship, because, you know, to me, there's a shift for me personally. You know, it's the reoccurring themes that I bring to the podcast, but when it comes down to it, you have what I call pre-George Floyd and then post-George Floyd, right? And, you know, it was the first time where there was no distractions and no one could turn away from the screen. You had to witness this. And so to me, it became hyper relevant, super important for me to like step up and speak out, because I started hearing the voices of people who were saying things that I've always said, but I always felt like I was saying it in isolation. I always felt like I was saying it about myself. And once I started hearing those voices, I felt the need to show up for those people in all my different communities and all my different ways. Like me coming to this podcast was definitely that call to action, right? Like Figo had hit me up and was like, we need you at the table. And so I was like, I'm there. Usually I'd be, you know, I'm a guy with a mask on with gold teeth. I'm trying to create as much space and distance between anybody and everything that I can. But I realized that I needed to show up in so many more ways than just making music, right? Because that was my main tool for communication. But I realized people learn in so many different ways. And this is one more platform to reach people. And so when I hear that, you know, you've kind of taken that approach because of your intersectionality and because of these multiple overlaying identities, you know, and to have that sense of belonging, that sense of community, right? Like we talk about it a lot here, right? What community really means is the support system that you have around you to be your authentic self, to be honest with who you are, because there needs to be that affirmation, that validation that you know, we're tribal people, right? Yeah. Everyone has a role within the tribe, and we need that belonging and acceptance in our own little groups, right? And I think social media has created this gigantic, huge void of false community in a lot of ways, where people aren't acknowledging the actual boundaries, right? People aren't acknowledging that, you know, we are kind of separate in this digital age, and we're not having enough conversations without people viewing it, right? Like this is a public forum, right? But we also need conversations that aren't on camera, that aren't recorded, that aren't, you know, like as storytellers, it's more so about how it makes you feel and what you remember, but, you know, via the words, versus I can pick up the book and see every little, you know, punctuation, every little inflection, every little moment. There's so much capacity in the spirit and the soul that you can't always translate just in words. You gotta, I mean, think about it. When you go to church, you're not going to church to just read a book. You're going there for the sense of community and for that translation through someone's spirit, someone's soul, to really encompass what these words mean, to really lead you and guide you through what these words are. And that goes for anything and everything. So with that, I want to rewind it, take it back. Where is your family from? Like, where's your parents come from? Like, what is the context of kind of the specifics and that part of your identity?
Well, my family is from China, Jiangxi province in the southern part of China. And they have seen a tremendous amount of change. So what happened for them, they were born towards the end of when there were emperors in China. And they, at 12 and 13 years old, they fled the communist revolution to Taiwan because the communists took over, and they were pretty much spent their teenage and their 20s in Taiwan, came over to New York and met there and got married, and then came to Los Angeles, had me and my little sister, and I have an older sister who's 7 years older, was born in New York. But when I think about them, they took me back to their home village. They grew up in a house where 10 generations of Yangs all live together, aunts, uncles, everybody, that kind of community in this huge house. And yet, they had to flee, and they were completely displaced. And going from that, where, their house had like an open sewer running through it. It was like, I was just like, oh my God. And them coming from China to Taiwan to New York and then Los Angeles, they have experienced radical change. And that's why I don't blame them, that like sometimes, I get frustrated that they don't get me, but like, I don't get them either. Like there's experiences I can't even imagine that my dad was so hungry some days he had to be carried to school because he didn't even have the strength to walk himself to school. So, I'm incredibly grateful for them, but it's hard because we have this gap that it's hard to bridge because, there's the language barrier and just like the experiential barrier that I will never understand. And so, honestly, I love my parents. For where they came from to where they are now, they are very open-minded and accepting. They took a huge risk to leave, 2 of their homes to come over to the US and create a better life for all of us. So that's where I'm from. And they're still alive. The stories they tell me about what they lived through, like war and famine, and running from the communists who were imprisoning, killing people simply for being artists. I don't know if you knew that, but artists, and I think that's why they get so scared for me when I'm very outspoken, I'm an artist. It's still embedded in their trauma. Like being an artist is going to get you killed. So it's pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah, but it almost is like the kind of poetic justice, if you will, like, you would have to be this person in order for all those things to make sense. Like to really wrap your head around it, it's not necessarily random and it's not like by chance. It's like to the degree that, beyond just like, oh, you don't get to pick your parents. You're born into a family, that's it. But for what your family has experienced and for what they've been through, to now be like, here we are, you're made the transition from China to Taiwan to New York to LA. You give birth to this being and this person who is now, after decades, right, from childhood and adolescence, understanding of what's necessary to the world and what's needed. Like, I'm not trying to dictate that we need it. I know we need it because of me being a person of color, me being someone who lives in this country. We do need diversity and equity, inclusion. We need education. We need understanding about that. Because when not to shame anybody or to blame any government, but it's like when you call yourself a communist government and you have also the most Rolls Royces that are actually owned in any part of the world, that is quite the contrast between communism and capitalism. That is quite the, it's like, you call it what you want, but at the end of the day, there's still people suffering. There's still people who have been impacted, even though the fundamentals sound, nice and sweet. I think a lot of times we get so caught up on the old names, right, that we don't take the time to say, let's pick and pull what we like and create something new, right? We're like, when I think about my own kind of education and experience around, identity, right? Like identity, whether it be, sexual orientation, identification, class, whatever you want to call it, race, we are so far removed from what was to what is now.
Yeah.
And the level of understanding and the level of like, what was once rigid is now fluid, right? For all intents and purposes. And I think that that's very hard for a lot of people to conceptualize and wrap their head around. But let's be real, like we're at a time when there's so much being said around acceptance and differences in like the spectrum. Like you say, you occupy a thin line, but I see that as like a 5-lane freeway, right? Where you're now with highways and underpasses and streets that are old, rugged, and beat up, and you're trying to, pave the way for something that is somewhat new, right? Like you're trying to create the tunnel for someone to safely travel and navigate this twisty, messed up kind of. We didn't think about how big cars were going to be. We just made streets. And you're like, no, we have to think about what is this road really taking us to and how is it going to get us there safely, right? Like not just about like having it, but having it make sense. And so to me, when I hear that story, it's like, it makes super sense for you to be the person that you are. Like, of course, there's that divide. They made the choice to leave what was familiar because of the danger, right? Like, as hard as it is for people to understand that, like, when your life is being threatened, the choice is, it's what do you stay, right? Or do you try to live, you try to survive, you try to create the legacy and live on. And I think that, I always say about culture, right? Like, when we talk about language, we talk about, your national origin and being able to trace it back to the town you lived in. When we talk about like legacy history, you have that, but you also have that break, that divide where you also identify as an American, where the culture you grew up in, the school you went to, like the experiences you had, like even the dynamics of bathrooms. And like, I mean, how many Chinese people were at the school that you went to?
Well, in elementary school, the first school I was at, it's really sad. There were not a lot of Asians. And my elementary school teacher even told my mom to only speak to me in English at home. So my first language when I was, growing up was Chinese, Mandarin Chinese. And unfortunately, I lost most of my Chinese because of that teacher who basically forced me to become like her definition of what it means to be American, which was English only. And I'm still pissed about that to this day because I was freaking amazing in Mandarin and I've lost most of it.
Yeah, I mean, I see. That's what I'm saying is that, like, think about what your parents came from, where the chances of running in. I mean, you say it's southern China, right? Was this like a more rural area or like urban city? Like
very rural. It's a town called Beijing. It's actually where the Communist Revolution was born in China because they were so poor. It was mostly farmers and it was a village. And yeah, when I went there, I was shocked to see like a lot of people still like riding around in those like kind of rickshaws. So yeah, it was very, very like old school rural China.
And when did you go? When was the last time you visited? Like what year was it?
2004.
So 2004, we talking about like 16 years ago. I don't know about y'all, but I don't recall seeing nobody in no rickshaw unless it was on the Embarcadero. So you got to really think about that. Like we talking about the normal means of transportation for me in 2004 was a train and the bus, or maybe a ride if I got lucky. And you talking about what looked like the norm was, yo, hop in the back. I'm just going to run you down the street. And that's that. And it's not even on some cute, let's take pictures and be a tourist. It's on some like, we got to get to where we got to go. And this is your job. So I need you to hurry up. Like, think about that, right? Like the dynamics in that shift that people don't really think about that, but it's so real. And it's so necessary to know that like where you come from and what your parents experienced has impacted you in a multitude of degrees. And, like hearing what you're saying, like you're a revolutionary in your own right. So for you to come from a place where a revolution more or less was started and now be here and be a part of what I call this new era of revolution that we're in, where we're trying to define it and really be concise. I think it's it's the bittersweet poetry of it all, right? It's that poetic justice. It's that kind of tragedy but triumph all in one, right? Where it's like we kind of all go through that in our own way, but more so what you're saying and what you're displaying is it's powerful. People don't really get the chance to even reconcile, right, the love of their parents when it comes to having those differences and having that gap, right? Like as hard as this is to say, even for myself, there's a level of acceptance involved with your people are your people, right? It's not that they're supposed to be perfect. Like the day you find out that your parents aren't your superheroes, right? Like, oh, they just like me. We all have our struggles. And I think that's super, super important. But now that we kind of have that, you're working on a book, and this book is called the Spineless Porcupine. So we actually, with amongst ourselves, me and June more specifically, we're trying to, decipher the exact terminology. It's like, the play on words, the spineless porcupine. And I was like, there's some double entendres in there. There's some bars in that right there. But I want to hear from your perspective, kind of, what is that? Not as concise, maybe open-ended, but please let us know. What is up with the spineless porcupine?
Thank you. You are exactly right. It is a double entendre. It's the spineless porcupine is my life story in an allegory. It's about a porcupine named Maddie who's born without any spines. She's got no quills, and she's the daughter of a warrior chief of the most elite porcupine warrior tribe. And here she is defenseless. And eventually she gets outcasted because everybody finds their identity in their ability to protect themselves. And she just can't cut it because she doesn't have those spines. And eventually she gets ostracized and she runs away and she gets picked up by the circus and becomes this star performer. So just imagine, just like I did, like, being a boy trapped in a girl's body is how I felt. Like I just didn't fit in anywhere. And then all of a sudden, like I got picked up by the circus. And what do I mean by the circus? Like Christian ministry actually really loved how I transformed into becoming more feminine. And I was like a poster child for the anti-gay movement for years. I was speaking to stadiums of 40,000 people and like traveling all over the world. So, the story of the spineless porcupine, she becomes like this headline performer because she has no spines. And yet she feels so empty inside because even though she's performing and everybody's like cheering her on, they love her for what she can do, not who she is. And she meets another albino creature who is another headline performer, but he won't perform anymore. And he basically tells her like, hey, we're not made for the circus. We're made to be untamed and in the wilderness. We're wild animals and we're made for adventure.
Hold on, wait. Are we getting to a spoiler alert? Because I feel like you taking me through it, and I'm like, hold on, I want to.
All right, I'm gonna stop it there, but I'm gonna tell you the reason why like this story means so much to me is because like remember how I told you in the beginning how I performed to protect myself, and one of the things I've come to realize is that we're not made for the circus. Like we're not made for efficiency, productivity, and control. Like we're all built for love and belonging, and it's not efficient, predictable, and something we can control. And when we want to talk about like being a revolutionary, I'd like to put some language to what I think this revolution is happening right now as we speak. And Alex, feel free to chime in too. But like what I'm seeing is that most of us were raised with the Industrial Revolution kind of being the backbone of society. It's all about conformity, the assembly line, everybody get in line, like what you're talking about, rigid, linear, like efficiency, productivity, control, all about output, all about like us just like making things faster, bigger, stronger, right, better, bigger, right? It's like that's the American way, bigger, better, faster, stronger, right? But it's killing us and it's killing our planet. this like endless cycle of consumerism and productivity and capitalism is absolutely destroying our planet and us. Like all this consumption, where does it get us? We feel emptier more than ever. We're keeping up with the Joneses on Instagram, Facebook. So what? Like at the end of the night, I'm going to bed like feeling lonely and scared and empty and isolated. And I feel like, you know, my friend Dominique Hollins, she shared, the shelter in place is a cocoon. We've been living like caterpillars, you know, just laboring and struggling and fighting and just like moving so slowly, not really getting anywhere. But right now we have an opportunity. I feel like the universe, God, whoever, divinity has put all of us in a cocoon, in this shelter in place, in this quarantine, to get us to think and transform and shed off like, hey, you know what? We're not living in the industrial age anymore. You know, we're not here to just make things bigger, better, faster, stronger. We're made for something more. We're made for love and belonging, which is not efficient it's not about productivity and control. So like right now, we can choose to shed off the old ways of the Industrial Revolution, the rigid, linear, you know, assembly line, and become butterflies where we're living for connection. We're here like to connect hearts. We're here to create. We're here to love. We're here for adventure and wildness. We're here to be untamed. And, you know, I'll end with this because this is something I'm so passionate about. The reason why I love lyrical opposition so much is that there's a quote by Patty D, and it says, the shortest distance between two people is a story. You want to connect people, you want to build bridges, tell stories. And Victor Borge said this, laughter is the shortest distance between two people. So artists have a very special role, creatives, lyricists, storytellers, to connect to people's hearts and be part of this revolution. This is the way of the butterfly, is to create, to tell stories, to love, to connect, and to build that belonging and this eternal family that's actually going to be why we're here. We're here to thrive in relationships. And that's, if we want this planet to survive, if we want to thrive, we have to choose the way of the butterfly, which is love. So there's my like revolution.
Boom, 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 boom. Okay, so much to unpack. Wow. Thanks for going all the way in. Just thank you for diving. Thank you for diving in. First off, the fact that a caterpillar's like purpose is to store energy and then find a place to rest. Like that's really all it does. It consumes. And then it says, I need to find somewhere to shelter and then transform.
Yes.
Like we're totally there. And the fact that the speed at which a caterpillar and a butterfly moves, you know, are on opposite ends of the spectrum. And it's so important for us to see this, what seems like stillness, to be more like a springboard.
Yes.
To where we're now taking that energy and using it to transform everything that we've gone through, everything that we've been through, everything that we're going through now, everything that we are able to process. Like no one ever thinks about what can a caterpillar hear or see in stasis, in a cocoon, right? Like what is like actually being processed as they grow new antenna, as they grow new features, as they grow new modes of transportation. And it's really, when we talk about modes of transportation and then how we interact with each other, it's really important that we acknowledge what's happening digitally, right? And how we travel now. And really, like the American passport is now like flipped. It's an opposite of its function now, where there's like 13 countries we can travel to. It's like 4 Balkan countries, Mexico, the Maldives, and 7 Caribbean countries. And that's it. We can't even go to Hawaii. before it was probably like 13 countries that you probably didn't want to go to as American or wouldn't let you in anyway. Um, and so it's wild that, it's virtually useless where we have to kind of sit still and sit in our mess that we made. And it doesn't have to stay a mess at all. And you're totally right on. Dave Chappelle, another hero of mine as well, where we're in a space now where this is where artists, are born and thrive. This is where they're supposed to be. This is, where they show up, get ready, put the suit on. Um, it's about that time, but more than that, it's like open artistry and being okay with your voice. I love the title of the Spineless Porcupine, and just like spineless without like, the their own support, but also like the voice, of no quills, the lack of voice, of no quills, that Maddie has. And, when I think quill, I think writing. And
Good.
so I think about writing with a quill, and how important it is to write and write jokes, write songs, write tracks, produce beats, and write on the hearts of the people that we come across, as we create relationships, because it happens in small, conducive interactions. Yes, we see the result on a grand scale, and in large displays at times, but like every protest we see happens with a conversation. Hey, I'm coming out. Are you coming out?
Yes.
Like that's how thousands of people go outside, is because one talks to another, talks to two, talks to three. It's not a 20-person meeting, say we're going to be here. It's these small interactions. Right? Lacey, tell the truth. That's the thing, is we got a lot of work to do. Lacey can write the poem. It's so good. And we got folks who are equipped to tell these stories. And what happens is, as soon as you tell a story, you're telling someone else's life too. And not just yours. And that's where we see how we're connected. When one person writes a book and one person reads it at a time, and we see that, hey, I'm in that space too. I've been that person too. I've been on stage for other people, and not for myself. And I've been in the public eye for other people and not sure why I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been, pushed into performing, for others, being on for people when I wasn't ready to be on, while I was still, trying to find, where I belonged, and it's so great that we're all here, with time to figure it out. I think for me, the greatest thing was realizing and accepting that I'm not just an employee. I'm not just a tax ID number. And I don't have to go back to that. I don't have to go back to the 2020 grind, or the 2019 really. 2020 is a different animal. I don't have to go back to 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week. I don't have to work 6 days a week. Like, we don't have to go back to that. We can pursue balance, and balance is something that changes all the time. Balance is not stasis. Balance is not even equilibrium. It's shifting and changing, and creating stability has to do with movement, not staying still. And I think we're in a place of of movement, and it's really exciting that we have you here right now and this week. I think it's going to be a historic week when we look back, as everything that's transpired so far.
Yeah, I'd like to share, and Cindy, if you want to jump into, I wanted to share a poem that you reminded me of, Alex, that I wrote. It's very short. It's called Fig Leaf Syndrome. And it's about how, Adam and Eve, they were naked and unashamed, and then they covered themselves with fig leaves. And we are in the cocoon, I believe, to shed off all those fig leaves that we put on to hide ourselves because we didn't think we were good enough. We didn't think we were enough. And we are enough. That's the truth. We are enough. And so the poem just goes, I wrap myself in all that glitters, not knowing that I was a diamond concealing something far more beautiful than my disguise. And I think what's happening in the cocoon, we're shedding the way of the caterpillar, which is hiding and disguising ourselves. And we're shedding all of that we thought we had to compensate because we weren't enough. But if I could tell anybody anything right now, while we're in shelter in place, start shedding off all those costumes and disguises. Like I came out like publicly on LinkedIn in June because I was like, I'm done pretending. Like, this is who I am, like it or not. I'm going to unveil who I really am, that the butterfly me, which is who I've been all along. So I would encourage all of us to go inward and express and create from that place of genuine self, like who you really are, because you are enough. You are the seed that's going to birth this revolution of love and creativity and belonging. But you got to let go of all that, the caterpillar, all that glitters, all that you've been told, like, oh, this is how you can be enough. You got to do everything bigger, better, faster, stronger. No, like you truly are enough just as you are.
That's so good. Like, Cineo. So remember how we was talking about our anime, proclivity. And so I've been rewatching Naruto, and Naruto, like, totally wearing masks at the beginning of the series, where he's acting out, he's like damaged, he's just because of how people see him, he's trying to create his own narrative. And then it's not until someone accepts him, till Iruka Sensei accepts him, that he accepts himself enough to not act out and say and determine what his purpose is, because he has where he wants to go, but doesn't really know why he wants to get there. And what he learns as he builds these bonds and these relationships, he then has something that he wants to protect, and then he has a reason, what's his ninja way, and something that guides him through every decision that he makes. It's his compass, his moral compass, it's his integrity, it's the way he chooses to show up at every moment, at every crossroads in his life from then on. And then they make about 800 plus episodes, all themed around this idea that if you abandon your mission, you're scum, and if you abandon your friend, you're worse than scum. And I think, we need to get back to that. If you abandon the person right next to you, right, that shortest distance, that story, if you abandon that story and just listening to that story, you abandon the person, and if you abandon the person, you're worse than scum, because I think that's where we are now, like coming up, like cleaning up all this scum, and it's all over the place is what we're finding out. For a lot of people, that it's everywhere, it's insidious, it's overt and covert, it's on accident, it's microaggressions, it's unintentional, it's surprising to people, and it's been there the whole time, and people have been hurting, and we all need to shed those masks and create relationships with self first before acquiring things. Acquire who you are.
No, that's real. That's real. I mean, I want to actually touch on what Say had said when it came to the Industrial Revolution, because
I knew it because she went it so hard at the beginning. She went so hard at the beginning.
You touched on something that I feel like a lot of people don't really pay attention to, and I'm trying to get my own, like the other me, the me without the mask. I'm trying to get the people at my one of my organizations that I work with to understand how much of what we're trying to change is being used or being done within the confines of outdated terminology, practices, and systems, right? Like, we're not taking the time to actually like come from the foundation. We're saying, based off the foundations that are already here, now we're making a difference. And it's like, you can't make a difference if we don't really scrutinize where the soil is. Where are we basing this off of? Is this on solid rock or is this on landfill? Because a lot of what's going on is on landfill, right? Like, it's on this shaky, non-solid ground. And you know, like, something that pissed me off, they were like, oh, well, how do we measure our short-term success with clients? And I'm like, who is this for? Because I'm the one that serves the clients. Who is this serving? Because to me, I don't care about short-term, right? Like, you need that for your own productivity scales and measurements to balance out and figure out things. But how is that? If this really isn't even for the funders and this is for ourselves, then we need to redefine, what are we measuring? Because right now what we're measuring is the same old tired crap that does not apply to the community that we serve. Like, really think critically. If we're saying we're going to push the narrative on inclusion, diversity, equity, and allyship, and you have the one person of color in the meeting telling you, hey, as a person who serves a community, or what the community's just people of color, right? I'm the service point. I'm the reason why you can produce these numbers to take back to your meeting to gloat and praise and celebrate. And I'm telling you, this small short-term success, I don't care about that. What are we really measuring? Are we asking our clients how they define it? Are we asking ourselves, what does it even mean to even factor success into the equation? Like, this to me is like problematic. You're sitting up here trying to convince me of selling this idea that is rooted in oppressive systems and rooted in oppressive measures. These systems that are archaic and don't serve anything but the meritocracy and hierarchy that we've all succumbed to. Like, come on now. Like, you talk about like trying to make things fair and just, but how much of this is rooted in the fundamentals of patriarchy to oppress people of color? Like, think about it. Like, we're not taking time to really, okay, let's take a step back and let's actually say to ourselves, what does it mean to redefine the work? No, we're like, oh, let's have a meeting and we talk about the trauma and the pain without actually really uncovering, like, how many times are you poking me in a day? How many times are you provoking me in this moment, in this meeting? Because to me, I don't think y'all are paying attention. You're just, oh, it's business as usual. And I like you said, the way you came and showed up is the same way I came and showed up. I had to be my actualized, real, authentic self, and I had to be the one to ask those questions. I can't tell you how many times in the organization I work with that now they're sitting up here talking about like, oh, we want to be proactive and do things differently. But at the same time, I've literally been trying to make you feel safe when I come in the space. I've been more thoughtful of how I make you feel comfortable than I thought about me coming in and actually feeling comfortable, right? I have to minimize and I have to scale down whatever my identity is, right? Me being Black, me being brown, me being from the city, me being, all these different things, to then say, oh, well, I don't want to offend you because I'm being authentic to who I am, because I have to accept this corporate culture that to me is toxic and literally super reductive, redundant, repetitive. Like, come on, like, we're regressing the more that we try to talk about professionalism. Like, what does that even mean? You're talking about professionalism in a time of a pandemic, in a time where people are in unrest when it comes to trying to be seen and be validated and be respected, to have their rights held up, to feel equal. Like, let's be clear. We're sitting up here like not taking the time to say how many of these systems that we keep on feeding into or actually feeding on us. Like, they're literally eating away, right? People want to say, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, but ain't got no feet. Like, what are you talking about? You're telling people who don't even have legs to pull themselves by the bootstraps. You took away their legs, and now you're trying to convince them that they could pull themselves up.
Yeah.
Come on. Like, we really got to think about this. Exactly. Right here. Professionalism equals assimilation. But that's right. They're not ready for that conversation. But I provoke any and all of you, however that needs to look, you need to talk about it. You need to show up. You need to let them know, because at the end of the day, if you don't take that opportunity, like I'm telling you, as somebody who works in an organization that serves the San Francisco Bay Area, and no one said anything until I put out this email to all staff, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't be this other me. I have to be my most real, authentic self. And then it turned into a snowball where everyone now is speaking up and showing out and saying what they want to do and how they want to participate in change, real change. And I'm not going to say it's going to be easy or it's going to be everyone who's going to catch fire. Like, trust me, I'm getting the resistance. I'm getting the hesitation, because there's people who still benefit from this oppressive system, right? There's people who still believe in invest the emotional and the spiritual energy into these systems to say, no, me as a person of color, I actually benefit from some of these oppressive measures, and I want to be able to utilize it to continue my upward success. Whereas me, I don't care about upward success. You have a role, you have a responsibility. Do that role. That does not mean that you're a superior. That does not mean because you're a manager, you're a leader. Like, let's be clear. If you don't actually display the skill set that to me shows leadership, I can't look up to you, right? You know how to manage systems. I'm not a system. I'm a human being. If I want to regulate myself, I eat fiber and I eat vegetables, and I make sure I eat the healthy things that I need if I want to be regulated. I don't need you to regulate me. I'm not infringing. I'm not harming. I'm not negative. I'm positive. I'm trying to be sustainable, and I'm trying to be healthy. But if you're now trying to tell me that I need to be managed, let's be real, y'all. This is not the way. So said it, but I'm going to say it too. At the end of the day, right? Show up, be your authentic self. It don't matter if it was yesterday or if it's tomorrow, but be that person you need to be. Period. Yes, I said it, because at the end of the day, people, right? We sometimes sleep on ourselves. Sometimes we sit up here and we be caught up in the fact that, like, you know, what are we? Yeah, I'm gonna give you that Java. This that Cuban coffee. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna get you ready to go. Your heart gonna start beating. You're gonna be running fast. This is what we got to do. Let's go. Let's energize.
Clutch.
But it's real, because you got to be you, right? I put the mask on for anonymity because I feel like it's more important for me not to become a commodity, because I am a rapper, right? Yeah, I could distract you with the shiny teeth, but at the end of the day, you really got to pay attention to what's being said, right? Because this is deeper than gold, right? Dig and really understand, discover, figure it out, right? I'm giving you the space to say it's okay to create those boundaries and to have that space. But I'm also saying, be your most authentic self. Be your most realist self, because people will try to infringe. They will try to impose. We are at a time right now where the conversation has to be filled with compassion. I'm not going to get on here and talk spicy. If I want to do that, we'll cut the camera off and we'll have that spicy conversation. But for the need of the public and my responsibility to you, the listeners, and those, whether they're live or whether they listen to this being pre-recorded, I want you to understand, you need to know that time and place is important, and you need to know what is your responsibility to yourself and those around you, and how do you show up. So on here, right, I'm here to say, I'm going to be responsible and I'm going to be mindful, right? I'm going to rep that LO brand. I'm going to show up and be my most authentic self within this vehicle, right? But when I step outside this vehicle and the conversation changes, I'm going to still show up and be that authentic person. I'm still going to be that real me. And I hope that everyone can do the same. So say with that, I appreciate you saying that part about the Industrial Revolution, because we are in a new industrial age, right? You think about how many tech startups have been upended by this new age, right? You think about where we were headed was the biggest like property developer, real estate like company didn't own property. They just created an app to license you to rent your property, right? When you think about transportation, the biggest transportation companies that are now about to suffer greatly because they don't know if they're going to be held to a new standard of saying they're these contractual workers are really employees, right? The biggest company in transportation had no ownership over cars, right? When you really think about it, when you think about the real estate and where the investments are going, it's not in physical property, it's intellectual property. We're in an age right now where the electronic industrial revolution is taking root. And the thing is, all those standards and systems are like, think about how many times in the past 6 months they've had the leaders of tech go to meet in congressional hearings to talk about, do they need to be regulated, right? But that's really where we are right now. We're in this new age, right? We're in this new time. We have the platforms, we have the vehicles. And I mean, yes, I will push the narrative. One of y'all, hopefully you can raise your babies to be the next tech guru of color, so we don't continue to have our revolution on a platform that benefits those who don't look like us, think like us, or really care about us. As much as they provide us the space, they do have the resources to support our change. But that's not where they're putting it. They're benefiting in the way where we just continue to consume and create content for them without us actually owning it. And I want people to really be mindful. I'm going to be on my baby something tough. I'm going to love them. I'm going to give them that space. But they're going to have some fundamental skills that are necessary for this world so they can adapt. They can help other people adopt and believe that they can challenge the status quo of what we're in, right? Because when we sit up here and we look at people saying, I'm going to an Airbnb, they making buku money, but they don't own nothing, right? We talking about, I'm going to catch a Lyft, I'm going to catch an Uber, but they don't own not one vehicle and they making the dollars. So if the ownership is in not owning really anything and just giving you this electronic housing system, this kind of application of how you present yourself and a part of their communities, we now have to create our own. We have to be mindful of how we show up. We have to be proactive and you know, provocative in what we do, what we decide to do, and how we want to do it. So, you know, say with that, I'm interested in kind of how did you come to that realization that the industrial revolution is over? Like, when did you come to that moment where, what was the aha moment? Because I know for me, I'm gonna be honest, that aha moment was me watching a Vice News segment about a dude talking about the next revolution of industrial age and how we don't own nothing. So I still inject all that, but I see it as truth. But you said it, so I want to know, when was that moment for you where you like, we aren't on an assembly line no more. I'm not clocking in today.
Yeah, well, we have to know where we came from in order to know where we're going. We were born into this culture, like what you're talking about, the corporate culture of like conformity, like everybody get in line. Let's all do a cookie cutter. Like it's all about efficiency and processes, systems, and keeping everybody in line. And that's simply not the case anymore. Like you look at the biggest companies in the world, they're a commodity of ideas. They innovated, they came up with a new idea, and that is why they have grown so quickly. It wasn't because they were the most efficient, they weren't the most quote unquote productive, they were the most creative, they were the most innovative. And right now, we're in the age of ideas. So think about it this way. Industrial Revolution, the name of the game was efficiency, productivity, and control, and getting everybody to move quickly, linear, like everybody get in line, right? Right now, we have AI, artificial intelligence, robots, and automation that can do what humans do efficiently 100 times, 1,000 times faster than us. So guess what? Sad news is those jobs are getting replaced. Like, just look at your grocery line now. Like, robots, computers are replacing jobs. So what is the number one commodity right now? Good ideas. How do I know that? LinkedIn, they have gone through hundreds and thousands of job postings. And they found that number one skill in demand by all companies, like, is creativity and innovation. People who can, like you said, adapt quickly. So think about it. Like the thing that was valued most during the Industrial Revolution, productivity, efficiency, control, all those skills taken away by robots. What can humans offer that nothing, no computer, no robot, no AI, no automation can ever do? Ideas, creativity, innovation, yes, our originality. And that's why I feel like we have an invitation to go into the cocoon. I think, the universe, God, whoever you want to call it, has put us in this cocoon and going, hey, yo, the Industrial Revolution is over. The corporate culture that was built upon efficiency, productivity, and control, you don't need to live by those rules anymore because those rules have been taken over by robots. It's time to create a new model, a new culture, a new revolution that's all about you tapping into your true self. Like, I love Howard Thurman. He has a quote that says, don't ask yourself what this world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive and go do that. Because what this world needs is people have come alive. You know, when I hear about people like companies who are telling people to conform, oh, hey, can you be more like, you know, Joe? Okay. Well, you know what? I'm not Joe. Every single human being, like Alex said earlier, we are the most diverse species on planet Earth. And that's on purpose. We have a purpose for being so diverse because when we come together with our differences are our superpowers. They're not our weaknesses. They're not the things we're supposed to hide. They're our very superpower. And so, like, when I hear, you know, Sinio, that people are telling you to come to work and try to be somebody that you're not, this is what they're doing to you. They're handicapping you. They're literally telling you to shut down parts of yourself, and then they're telling you to be 100% productive. Okay, how am I supposed to be productive when you've tied my arm behind my back to tell me to try to be like somebody I'm not? But if you can accept me for who I am and all of me, you're going to get the productivity and the great ideas and the creativity and the innovation of all of me. So that's what, you know, that was the lightning bulb that hit me. And if you want to listen to a good talk about this, it's by Sir Ken Robinson. And he talks about, like, our educational system is built upon the Industrial Revolution, the assembly line thinking. Just think about, oh, math, English, go through, period. You're not thinking for yourself. They teach you to think. I mean, they teach you not to think, and they teach you to go and find the answer in the back of the book, and everybody conform. It's A, B, C, or D. I don't want to hear your ideas. And you know what? What Sir Ken Robinson discovered is that the longer you are in the educational system, so they tested 1,500 kids when they were 5 years old on divergent thinking, which is basically how many ideas can you come up with. These 1,500 random kindergartners tested at 98% of genius of divergent thinking. So basically all of us are creative. They tested these same kids 5 years later. It dropped down to like 60% or something like that. They tested them 5 years later when they were like 15 years old. It dropped down to, I think, like 28%. And like, basically we're getting our creativity and our original ideas educated out of us. And that's why the Industrial Revolution is not going to work. Because right now, if the most valuable commodity on planet Earth are ideas and creativity, then we got to shed off the industrial age thinking of getting in line, assembly line, just multiple choice, think like everybody else. That's going to kill us. That is killing us and our planet by thinking that way.
Hot cake, hot take. I'm just going to say it right now. Kindergarten teachers, you just heard. There is a think tank that you are underutilizing where you could literally tell these kids, what do you want to see in the world? And you can go and make gazillions of dollars off of all those ideas.
Come on.
Think of how overpopulated the classrooms are and how many people are stuck inside those rooms. There's 30 different ideas, or maybe 15 if you're lucky as a child, but there's a bunch that you can then pull from and you can go make some money. So holla at the kindergarten teachers for the next wave of the revolution. I would imagine there's going to be some unicorn mops and some maybe gargoyle, I don't know, like foam rollers. We'll see what happens because the kids are creative and they're the ones with the genius ideas. You've heard it here first. Everybody go and invest in a kindergartner. First, go get a 5-year-old because they're going to be your way to getting property, to getting a house, right? We're talking multi-generational wealth. It starts from the little itty bitty kids, the ones who really you just take for granted and think they're dumb, but in reality they're geniuses. And you just been, assimilated and formulated into this super archaic processes of like, just indoctrination, right? Like we're going to inundate you and inoculate you with a bunch of just ignorance, right? Just information, right? Information is not truth. Remember that. Information is not truth. Just because you're informed does not make it factual. Your life is the most absolute truth you have. Your experiences, your relationships, the moments of joy, the moments of pain, that's truth. The books that they give you, those are compartmentalized bits and pieces of things that they think is important. And I think that people have to be really mindful when they sit there and they're talking about an American Revolution and they try to denounce and dismiss and minimize all the other revolutions that have taken place in this country and abroad without actually giving it its just due and its weight. You are problematic. You are a product of the negative notion energy that we are trying to rid ourselves of. So go grab yourself a 5-year-old. Don't kidnap nobody. Go talk to your nephews, your nieces, your sons, your daughters. holla at them, don't do nothing illegal, like don't be weird about it. I understand we're social distancing. So, you call your cousin who just had a kid and, they running around acting a fool. You ask them the pivotal questions. What do you want to see in the world? Because that's more important than anything else. And you might end up being rich by selling whatever they said on Amazon. So, thus evil warlord, media creator, Amazon of the color. So yeah.
Start a digital daycare, aka a think tank, and take notes.
I want to
really,
oh, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, well, it's just really important that we acknowledge that the personality tests, right, are just multiple choices for, compartmentalizing yourself, right? The information that are in books, right, again, are just parameters for things they want you to regurgitate that won't necessarily help you in functioning in your everyday life. And if you can regurgitate those, right, it's that false meritocracy, like, oh, you've earned something. And really all you've earned is their trust that you will fall in line. And if you lose your ability to critical think, to create and, step outside of, paradigms and see your own truth, if you lose that ability, then all you can do is work for somebody. That's the only option you have, and that's what we see happening is people just left with the only option is to fall in line. And the sooner we learn that that's not the case, that you can step out and create your own line. You can create your own community, create your own way of thinking, your own own assembly format to build. Then the sooner we can start to shift things. It's just really wild. I'm so happy to be here right now, you guys.
I mean, it's super real though. It's like I think enough conversation hasn't been had around how do we transform our thought processes outside of what's been given to us. Like, the only non-negotiable you really should have in life is who you're born to, right? Like that's the only non-negotiable we should all be afforded. You don't get to pick and decide who you are born to. Outside of that, we should have free range to really explore and discover what is it that we are and who we are and what do we want to do and how do we want to do it. We have so much knowledge and so much just collective experiences that we could pull from to really devise something that is innovative and supportive of a more sustainable future for ourselves. And I think that, people are afraid, right? Like you hear it all the time. Like there's those that are afraid of change. And the thing is, before we had these systems to kind of insulate ourselves, to give us the cocoon, we lived in a world where there was no boundaries, right? Like you had to figure out what does survival look like, right? We went from survival of the fittest, which is creativity, innovation, right? To have fire, to have tools, to have, to know, okay, let me inhabit this cave to protect those that I want to live on. We don't live in that society anymore, right? Even though we have homes, I mean, housing's like imperative, but also like it's not common, right? We have such a homeless epidemic. We haven't even successfully transformed from living into the wild, from now living inside these kind of urban, civilized kind of outlooks, right? We're not really thinking about how is this helpful and sustainable. We're more so like trying to have people create designs that prevent people from being able to use certain spaces. Like think about the inaccessibility that's happening right now, the conversations around people who are homeless and how they don't want them in places. I've been seeing boulders on the street, and it's like, what is actually happening that's preventing these people to have a place that they can call home, that they can feel safe, right? Like circling back to what you said, it's that journey and discovery of self. How do you find your way home? How do you find that place? Lacey left a comment and said, we've been grinding. Now it's time to rest. Right? But in that rest, that's meditation, that's cogitation, that's thoughtfulness, that's thinking deeply, right? That's not just, you're in complacency, right? You're recovering from all that's been done to you, all the impact that's been made on you. And now we're going to start in a new fashion, a new light, a new direction. And so, I think when you move forward from this conversation, anybody who's listening, or whether it's any one of us, like, this has me charged up and ready to do some things, make some things on top of what I already had on my agenda. And I think that I'm hoping for those that, get to listen and attend this, like, really pay attention to what's being discussed here. We're talking about creating safe spaces. We're talking about love. We're talking about how do we shift the narrative from how do I make sure the numbers show up to how do I make sure I feel okay and you feel okay? Like, really understand that you need to feel safe. You need to feel loved. You need to feel appreciated. There's nothing more productive than that. There's nothing more than that we could ever equate to value to put something on than to say that you're loved and you're appreciated by those around you, your peers, your community, your family, your friends. That's where we're trying to move things. And people be like, oh, well, that ain't got nothing to do with me and how I feel and where I'm going. Okay, you say that only because you may not have had the experience. And I will give you the benefit of that doubt. You may not have experienced what love is for yourself or what compassion is, because you might have grown up in a world that didn't give you any type of forgiveness, that didn't give you any type of leeway. And I'm here to say, it's okay. I'm still going to be there. I'm still going to be here. I'm still going to show up, and I'm still going to be that person that's going to say, I love you, I appreciate you, and I care about you. Because even though the world can be harsh, and even though it don't pay the bills, at the end of the day, guess what? A lot of people are unable to pay the bills. A lot of people right now are unable to do the things that we thought were going to be fundamentally sustainable and true. Right now, we live in a world where, we had a recession. What we finna do now? When we talk about just kind of shifting the conversation into what's going on right now in the world, let's talk about the lesser of two evils. Let's talk about the devil you know versus the devil you don't. People are having a lot of conversation right now about who to vote for. Who is their next identified leader? Who is the person that we're going to support? And I think that it's important for us to kind of, maybe we don't get through it all, but what is people's thoughts and feelings around our next leaders who may be or may not be in charge?
All right, I'll go for it. I got you,
Alex.
Yeah. My thoughts are simple, really. Well, I guess I have to explain them simply, more so than they are simple. It's real. I think it's really important, again, to understand, like, who cares about you and who doesn't. And if you're looking at career politicians, you're gonna have to understand that their agendas are multi-platformed, and they are going to be friends with people you probably don't like, that probably don't have your best interests at heart. And moving past November means making educated choices yourself. And there'll be a lot of things in our way for progress. I think we're seeing, the mail slow down. We're seeing, voter fraud, and we're seeing, polls, places closing in certain locations. And we know that there will be obstacles that will keep people from voting. And we have to do what we've always done, is persevere. Like, hope is resilient, and it has to stay that way. It has to stay on our minds that we can push forward, we can make choices, because regardless of whether you look at mass incarceration or different types of social injustice or trafficking or food safety or district lines, like, every career politician has made their mistakes and their missteps toward their own growth, I guess you would say. They only call them mistakes when it keeps them from growing. We call them mistakes when they hurt us, and hurt the people we love and hurt our communities. So I think taking measure of, what's a mistake to them and what's a mistake to us, is important. what they call a mistake. And I think something that happened that I was talking to a coworker, and we were agreeing that these executive orders that went through last weekend were really politically genius, because now no one has to make a decision right away, and no one has to show their cards. No one has to say, at least in the who the incumbents that are here now, they don't have to make a decision till later. And it's these weird misshapen band-aids that America is known for, that'll disillusion people. And if people are not paying attention, they'll say, oh, well, this guy just gave me $300. And it's a band-aid that doesn't fit where it's supposed to go. It's like putting a finger band-aid on your knee. It's like, it doesn't even wrap around. It's not what it's for. It's not giving you any support. But people will try to see the narrative that's tossed to them, fed to them, and without that critical thinking, it's like, if you can't create, then you can't create ideas. And so if you can't create ideas, then you're gonna accept what somebody else is giving you. And it's really important right now to just look through different forms of information than people are used to. We have to challenge ourselves to seek information, and seek the reality of things, and see what's really happening, because people will stand on different platforms to look good in different lights. And depending on what's important to you as a person, as a community member, that will I think determine again, what are the lesser of two evils. And okay, there we go. Inception. We did it. That's always important to realize that we are existing in more places than one. Time space is something that's always important. Time space is that unit of we're not just here, but if I stayed here for 5 years, the place I'm in will look different. And so where we are right now in this time, and geographically where we are, is historic, is momentous, and being in the now is so important. It's like knowing our past is knowing our past is how we escape it. And if you don't know your past, and you don't know what you're escaping, you don't know what you're running from. And if you haven't seen fences before, that doesn't mean they're not there. That just means they've been moved back, maybe. The boundaries that, and the limitations that they put on you, right? They're just kind of close right now, it seems, this year. And previously, it wasn't that, we were, boundless to explore. We've always been boundless to explore, if we look at the time space. And, you take that critical thinking muscle, and exhaust it a little bit, let it recover, and then see what else you come with. Chris, it is late.
Chris?
Chris, it is late for you. It is so good that you're here, but it is late for you. It's I think, the devil you do, and the devil you know, and the devil you don't know, doesn't take from the fact that they're devils. And they're all working in the same casino. And so when you acknowledge that, you have to play your own hand, and do what you can to come out on top against the dealer. But they're all being paid by you. And we have to take responsibility for that you have to vote for who you want to pay, and how you want your money to come back to you. Like, what is your return on investment? It's like, if I'm going to pay for something, I'm going to pay these taxes, whatever, Nikita, everybody's up here late. I like it. And it's important that we just look at where we want to pay. The devil is sleep. Nah, that's why they got campaign managers working, 16 to 20-hour days. So they can be just as insidious as ever tomorrow. Yeah, it's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll chime in here about government and all that. I think so. There's a saying that says the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And right now, our government has been operating the same way, expecting a different result, and we're getting the same results. And that same way is the zero-sum game mentality. Like, there's not enough to go around, so I'm going to hoard, and I'm going to take away from you so that I am going to, I'm going to protect myself. And we're not thinking in the long term. Like, there's such short-term thinking. Okay, what's the immediate gratification? What's the immediate result? And we're not thinking about what's actually sustainable. And that's, again, why our economy, our planet is suffering the way that it is, because it's a hoard mentality. It's astonishing to me that the billionaires are just raking in, Jeff Bezos is just raking in the money, while literally millions of people are living on the edge, or even have fallen off the edge into poverty. So I think it's time that we start to think very radically different. As I said, definition of insanity: do the same thing over and over again, expect a different result. Who do I think is pretty radical example of this? AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's thinking differently. And this ties back into the whole industrial age. We've been trained in the assembly line of our didactic education, where we're trained to think like everybody else. There's only one answer, and it's the back of the book. And you look at our politicians, they're just doing what has worked in the past, but it's not working anymore because we're in a new age. We're not living in the past. People, that whole saying about make America great again. Look, okay, we're not in the 50s and 60s. We're here now. So what's going to make us great now? What's going to make us great now is that we're going to think differently. I like what Steve Jobs, the whole think differently Apple. And he said, innovation is the result of connecting past experiences. But if you have the same experiences as everyone else, you're unlikely to look in a new direction and think differently. So what we need right now is people who have different experiences. Again, this ties back into why diversity, equity, and inclusion is so important, having everybody represented on the table, because you cannot innovate if you don't have different experiences at the table. And we're not going to look in a new direction, think differently, and make our country and this planet great if we don't have that diversity of thought. So I'm all for doing things differently. That's what we need right now from our government, and not from just our government. We need it from government, education, church, every single arena of life, the police system, the legal system, the justice system. We have to think differently because we are having the same results and they're crap. So are we going to stay insane and keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result? Or are we going to do things differently? And what do I mean by differently? I think right now, again, shelter in place, we have the prime opportunity to experiment with doing things differently. I love what people have been saying about okay, one, what do I mean by doing something differently? Experiment with this. Do what makes you feel alive. That's what I've been doing. Okay, Lyrical Opposition asked me to do comedy. All right, that makes me feel alive. Okay, I'm going to start a podcast about Black Lives Matter. That makes me feel alive. I'm going to do that. I feel like writing a book. That makes me feel alive. Go do that. The other thing that I heard earlier is resting. That's something that it is standing in the face of the industrial revolution, which is like work, 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 labor, labor, labor. And you know what? That's great for the short term, but you know what it leads to? It leads to burnout. But you know what will keep you sustained for the long term is like what Sinio said earlier, love. Like the way that I look at us is that we're like trees. And our water is love and belonging and acceptance. And when people affirm us, and when we're watered well, if we're a tree, guess what? We're going to start bearing like very easily without any effort. It's going to be fruit. We're going to be fruitful. We're going to be productive. We're going to multiply because we're being fed by the waters of love. Sure, like you can, beat me and try to get me to work and be highly productive. Okay, you get me for like 5 years and I'm going to burn out. So right now, I think we need to rest. We need to do what makes us feel alive. And the other thing I'm going to say about this is if you are feeling like your pain is surfacing, that's not an accident. Like a lot of us in shelter in place, the stuff that we've been numbing out by staying busy, by like, just constantly being on the go, pain is surfacing. And I want you to know, like I wrote a poem about this, about the metamorphosis. And pain, they are like strands. I will take these strands of pain and weave them into a chrysalis, and it will become a cathartic cocoon of transformation. If we actually stop avoiding pain, that pain is a catalyst to transformation. So I would encourage us right now, if you're feeling it, like I love what Alex said about being present. We got to be present. If that pain is surfacing, take it. Turn it into creativity, turn it into expression, go inward. Don't run from that monster because that monster will propel you if you're willing to embrace it. So that's my advice as we're going into this like new age in this cocoon. Like be present, be alive, do what makes you feel alive, rest, and embrace your pain.
That's so good.
Say, said it. Say, said it. Say, said it. I don't know if y'all really peeping the game being given, but it's for free if you're paying attention, right? There's not much work to do other than the work you need to do for yourself, right? This is what we're talking about. We're talking about love. We're talking about compassion. The thing is, right, as much as we talk about change and we talk about productivity in terms of our inner selves and what it means for us to be productive, right? How do we produce the fruits, right? Say then snatched the apple off the tree, made the juice, made the applesauce, served it up, and we're eating it right now. But how do you really do that, right? If you pay attention to what Say has been saying, it really comes down to how do you look inward to really reinforce and strengthen and love yourself. Accept, embrace yourself. Like, don't lose sight of that. Sometimes we learn it through others. Sometimes we're triggered by the response of the people around us, right? We come and we ask and then we receive. Sometimes it's not what we want, and sometimes it's absolutely what we need. And the thing is, when it comes to this moment in time and we're looking at all these different things, right? I know I said it, the devil you know versus the devil you don't, but it is true. It's how we show up and how we're consistent. How do we present ourselves and always present it in the most, sustainable fashion? Because to me, when I think of sustainable, I think of long lasting. I think of the marathon of life. I think about the journey, right? It's not about any one place. It's about us collectively moving and keep going into the future. You can go from China to Taiwan, from New York to LA, and the journey will not end there. Just because you might have planted roots there, now it's time for upward mobility. It's time to let those branches reach the sun, to feel the breeze, and to be watered by its community all around you, right? Don't drown in it. Really find the balance. Really understand what is your capacity and what is your needs. Because what we're talking about is, as lyrical opposition being the bigger umbrella, a part of Lyrical Ones, this being episode 11, us being here again, the 11th week of us continuing the message of being advocates, right? Being activists, right? Being thoughtful about change, pushing forward how we collectively move. Yes, Nikita said it. Pay attention, y'all. It's really the thing of how do we create the community that we need? Lyrical opposition is a community. And in that community, we have this platform. We're trying to encourage, inspire, and support others, right? Whether it's our friends and our family, just to give them that extra sense of like the energy's there, right? We're trying to create this positive energy to be a sustainable thing that we can use to shower us with the love that we need. Because that's what this is at the end of the day. As much as we talk about all these different things, whether it be the politics or the leaders, whether it be about their past, whether it be about you figuring out the forgiveness for these leaders, or whether it's you finding the right leader and pursuing and pushing that, like really think critically of how do you love you first, right? They tell you, put the oxygen mask on you first, then on the one next to you, right? So that's what this is. You got to serve yourself first so you can be able to serve it to another person. You have to know what it is that you're serving to know that it's actually something worth giving.
Yeah.
If you sit here and you're like, oh, I'm going to give you this water, but I don't take the time to really see, is this poison? What justice and what service am I really giving and doing for you, right? I need to really make the time to make sure that what I'm doing is worth it. Because if I end up with a stomach ache, I know. But if you end up with a stomach ache, you're going to resent me. And I ain't trying to have that. I'm not trying to have that be a part of anyone's journey, anyone's story. You know, Say has said a lot. And I think that those quotables you can revisit, come back to, really discover the gems within them, right? The spineless porcupine is a double entendre on many levels, but it's not so much about what the porcupine does not have as much as accepting, embracing, and holding on to what they do have, right? That encouraging, like, understanding of who you are. You are always going to be enough. You are always going to be special. You're always going to be valuable. And you can't let the oppressive systems that they've dictated to all of us try and deter you, destroy you, bring you down, right? Don't dismiss, don't minimize, don't place those self-limiting beliefs. I mean, whether you believe in God or whether you believe in self, believe in something. Like, that's the fundamental thing. That is bounteiless. It is ever growing, and the capacity is limitless as long as you believe that, right? Bring it back to Naruto. Believe it. But the thing is, you got to believe it. You got to, right?
Yeah.
You got to really think about you. I mean, we could do the anime references all day. You know what I'm saying?
All day.
Like, we could get the One Piece right now. Let's all get on a boat. We about to hit this up, go to the Grand Line. We're going to find the all blue. We're going to get cooking with Sanji. We're going to do our thing. We really out here. Let it stretch, right? Gum, let it go. You know what I'm saying? The devil
let it go.
fruit, it ain't about the devil. It's about what it could do for you. You got to give before you can get, right? Sometimes what you want's going to cost an arm and a leg. Shout out to the Elric brothers, because he definitely lost his arm and his leg to hold on to his brother's soul. So really think about these double challenges we coming up with right now, and really think about what is it you need, you the listener, or us here in this moment, to keep going, to keep pushing, to keep traveling. Love yourself. Be loved. I wear the heart on my head for a reason. But like I said, like, really think about it. Really be critical and explore the discovery yourself. So with that, do we have any final words? Anybody got anything they want to impart to the community and the people?
One time for the one time, I feel like we are, as a manufactured recession that we're in, we're experiencing burnout. I think the economy is experiencing burnout, and it's in a place of reigniting itself. But for us to come out on the other side of this, I think people have to choose that what's important to them are the things that pour into them. And one, if you don't give, then you can't give more. And if you keep pouring out without refueling, you'll be empty and less effective. And so if you got people that you care about, if you just learning how to care for yourself, take the time to find out what pours into you, what reinvigorates you, rejuvenates you, and those mechanisms will sustain you every time you're moving toward empty. It's an exciting time. I think everybody should be excited about the changes ahead, and be excited for skipping steps and what the status quo says you should do. If you think of a step ahead, then be a step ahead. If you think 10 steps ahead, then be 10 steps ahead, because there's a reason, that you're, thinking that way. You're probably equipped to manifest what you're thinking of.
Good. I would like to say to embrace our differences, like whatever makes you unique and different. as your superpower. Like I shared my story. I've always lived on that fine line, you know, of between male and female, Asian and American, queer and Christian, occupying that fine line. And because of that fine line, which I used to think it was a curse, like I was cursed for being so different, always not fitting in one box or the other. And now, because I've operated and lived in that non-binary space, I build bridges constantly between seemingly opposing groups. I can connect to the marginalized in ways other people can't. And so I would just ask you, if you're listening, explore your own story and what of your story makes you different and more unique than anyone else. Nobody else in this world has experienced what you've experienced. And there is something, I tell you, like whatever it is, it's usually the thing you avoid the most is the very thing that is your superpower. Like I know like Glennon Doyle is one of my heroes. She's an incredible writer. She wrote a book called Untamed. For her whole life, she ran from writing. And yet she is one of the most incredible writers. For years, she hated writers and she hated writing. But whatever it is you're running from, I'm telling you, like, and that's why I'm saying like the pain is surfacing, because I feel like we have an invitation to embrace the thing that we're running from. And oftentimes it's the thing that we were teased about. And that's another thing I want to encourage, like Sinio hit on that point about embracing ourselves. A lot of what I've been doing in Shelter in Place, I attended this boot camp called Biology of Belonging, where we go from like 1-year-old to 2-year-old to 3-year-old self. Like when I was a 1-year-old, encountering my 1-year-old and embracing my 1-year-old, my 2-year-old, my 3-year-old, and really making that connection. So I want to I think we have been doing things a certain way over and over again, the industrial age, like the system, you know, the way that's always been done. Please, we all need everyone to start doing things differently for the sake of our planet, for our economy. You know, like Alex said, we are burning out and we are emptier more than ever doing the way things has the culture, the society we've been doing. It's time to do it differently. And it starts with us embracing ourselves and our differences.
True that. You know, it's bringing to mind and highlighting, right, the idea of not just embracing, but also like embracing your failures, right? That like, you know, people often say practice makes perfect, but it's not that it's making something perfect, it's that the practice is perfection, right? I'm not saying being perfect, right? This ideal self. You're trying to be your authentic self. That's perfection. The truth and honesty of who you are is perfection. And the practice of always doing that, the practice of you presenting that, the practice of how you approach that, that is perfection, right? There's power in that. And I think it's transformative and it's fundamental for you to understand that the practice doesn't make perfect. It's that practicing is perfection itself. And when you continually practice, right, you don't question your breath every time you do it, but guess what? It's repetition. You don't question how the world turns and the sun rises, but it's practice and repetition. So when we say these things and we repeat certain affirmations and we repeat certain words, it's not for the sake of redundancy as much as it is to remind yourself to breathe, as much as it is to remind yourself to be grateful for the little that we do have in these moments, right? Because that practice is the perfection. It's the practice of these things that gives me the grounding to hold on to something. It's what gives my roots and able to absorb the water and nutrients that it needs. It's that practice. So rest is a practice. Prioritizing yourself is a practice. Not putting the work first, but putting yourself first, your health first, your sustainability, and your rest first is the practice, right? So I just want everybody to be clear, right? As this is episode 11 of the Lyrical Ones podcast, we have Say Yang as our guest, musician, author, filmmaker, comedian, poet, and activist, who is joining us and giving us so much fruit, so many gems, and so much love tonight. So as we often do at this time, I'm just gonna let it play and we gonna just wild out.
Okay. Thank you, Say so much.
Oh
Thank
my
you.
God. I'm honored. Thank you, Sinio. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Christian.
It's all good. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being here with us tonight. You know.
Yeah. Thank you for making it home. Yeah, you're welcome here.
Thank you. No, I was just gonna say, like, anytime you want me back, I love this. I love what we just did. Like that synergy and that just, oh my gosh, I felt like I was playing tennis with y'all, like going back and forth.
Yeah. That's it. That's all it is that exchange, you know, and that exchange I think is something that will never change no matter the distance between folks. You know, we can always have that exchange. And why art is important.
Yeah, exactly. I'm all about it. Oh, hey Nikita. Thank you.
Yeah, shout out to everybody who was here with us. We appreciate y'all for interacting with us and giving us that energy, keeping us on our toes.
The live stream. Thanks for coming through, everybody.
I know. It's hella fun seeing people's comments. It's it really feels good.
Yeah, shout out to Christian, our mixer, our producer holding it down behind the scenes, our director, and getting the views up, always getting the views up. He can't help it.
Yes, good ideas.
Like he's just gonna keep us going on and on, like really, like
yeah, he'll keep it live.